Live across Kansas on the Gameday Radio Network and worldwide at PowerCatGameday.com. K-State fans, it's time.
Barnes, 35 to the 30, to the 20-yard line, 15, 10, 5, to the goal line, touchdown! Touchdown, Kansas State!
Wildcat Nation, welcome to Powercat Gameday.
He'll run to the outside, Skylar Thompson to the goal line, Wildcat touchdown!
Powercat Gameday is powered by KS State Bank with locations in Manhattan, Junction City, and Wichita. Online at ksstatebank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. CTI John Deere, your local John Deere dealer in Concordia, Clay Center, Abilene, and Wamego. Godfrey's Indoor Ranges and Tactical Supply, your American Heroes Superstore located in downtown Junction City. And Manhattan Area Technical College. Apply today at manhattantech.edu. The biggest pregame show in the Big 12 starts now. Wildcat fans, this is Powercat Game Day.
Week 1 did not go as planned for the Wildcats in a 27-24 come-from-behind win over South Dakota. But Skylar Thompson did help lead yet another double-digit fourth-quarter comeback, and K-State survives. Now the Wildcats welcome in an SEC foe that appears to be loaded, in particular on the defensive side of the ball. Mississippi State had no problem in a blowout victory over Stephen F. Austin last week. They'll bring one of the country's best defensive lines, better than Alabama's, per Phil Steele, into the Little Apple today. Welcome into Powercat Game Day. I'm John Kurtz, joined by Corey Dean and Cole Manbeck, as always, here. You'll hear from Tim Fitzgerald, Robert Lipson, previews around the Big 12 Conference, and Kevin Lockett before we hand you off to the K-State Sports Network at 9 o'clock. Guys, the win over South Dakota is not what anybody was looking for. K-State did survive, but there was a lot that went wrong and a lot to look at the film and review over the past week for K-State.
It was, John. I mean, it was quite a mess out there. I mean, the offensive line that we all thought would be a very good group for this team, they played very bad. I mean, it was a poor effort by them. I mean, they got shoved around by South Dakota up front. I think that was one of the biggest disappointments in the game. The quarterback situation, the way K-State handled that, was a bit of a mess, and now I'm starting to question myself whether they should really go with that two-quarterback system the way that looked on Saturday. So a lot of issues, penalties, turnovers. It was pretty much a nightmare of game. The biggest thing is you save yourself from the embarrassment of a loss to an FCS school.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The thing that we really wanted K-State to do was come out and establish something early. We talked about this team starting slow several seasons in a row now. You're just losing ball games, or you're playing poorly to start the year, and some of the same issues that have plagued this K-State team for the past several seasons showed up again last Saturday. Not being able to finish in the red zone, settling for field goals, missed opportunities, some drop passes. These were things you hoped might have fixed themselves a little bit over the summer, and they certainly weren't solved last week for week number 1.
Many would look at the score and think, okay, how does this happen? This is embarrassing. It really changes my outlook on the season. I would tell you, if you would have told me going into the season, going into that game, that K-State's going to have a game where they're -4 in turnovers and they commit 13 penalties, I'd tell you they're not blowing anybody on that schedule out. Maybe UTSA, but that's about it. K-State just can't afford. They're not talented enough to lose the turnover battle like that and commit so many penalties and find a way to beat somebody by double digits.
I completely agree. And, I mean, if we look at this, honestly, they probably should have had 6 turnovers in the game. I mean, Alex Delton had 2 dropped interceptions. It could have occurred, but you have to look at that and hope that it's a bit of a fluke, because if you go over the last 2 seasons combined, K-State had 25 turnovers. They ranked in the top 10 in the country in turnover margin the last 2 seasons on average, with a +2 per game. So this was a game where K-State, just everything went against them, the way they performed, the penalties, the turnovers, Dalton Schoen dropping the pass that led to an interception. It just felt like one of those games where everything that went wrong, it just happened.
Well, and really those last 2 minutes of the first half is what gave South Dakota all the momentum, because you take the lead, it's 12-10, they score, pick 6, and that is a huge swing right there before halftime. Kudos to the defense, I will say, for holding them scoreless in the second half. If anything, there were some adjustments made, and K-State seemed to kind of get things a little bit together on defense in the second half.
Sometimes in the media, we don't always know what we're talking about. We hyped up this offense. The offense is where we felt like the strength was of this team. Big questions on defense, big questions on special teams. What saved the day last Saturday? It was special teams, the Zuber punt return, 4 for 4 on field goals for Blake Lynch, and the defense, which did hold South Dakota scoreless in the second half. So if you want to be an optimist here, everybody thinks the offensive pieces are there. It was everything else that was a worry, and that was actually the strength in Game 1.
No, I completely agree. I mean, Blake Lynch was nails out there and really impressed me. I think he's calmed a lot of the fans down now, knowing that, you got a guy that's reliable out there. I know it was one game, but, to nail one from 40 yards plus as well, and then, he was great in the kickoff game as well on the kick returns. So he was nails, and then obviously the return game was solid as usual, which I think we all expected that to occur. So that's more the one optimist point that you can take from the game is that the special teams was great.
The two-quarterback system, as Cole mentioned, felt very messy. It was clunky. It did not establish a rhythm with the offense, the way that they were using the two quarterbacks. Skylar Thompson played basically the first 3 series, and that was it until the fourth quarter. He had one in there at the very end of the half where he got thrown in, but people were frustrated with how much of a leash Alex Delton got as opposed to Skylar Thompson. And I think Skylar Thompson is the better quarterback of the two, but regardless of what you think, I would guess most have to draw the conclusion that this two-quarterback thing is not going to be all honky-dory like we were led to believe in the offseason, that it would be different than almost every other one we've seen.
Well, and I think you're right. It's more of throwing back to several scenarios that K-State has seen in the past where you try to have guys on equal footing and rotate them in and out, whether it's Sams and Waters or, heck, even if you go back to, L and Dunn. I mean, it's just not going to work the way that you want it to work. Somebody's going to be worried you're throwing the offense out of rhythm. I think those two guys play a little bit differently, and the team reacts a little bit differently when they're in. I think it makes it difficult for your offensive line maybe to establish some rhythm as well. I really would have liked to see somebody step up, and I think you saw Skylar again in the fourth quarter step up. He seems to be the guy.
This was my biggest issue in the game, was the quarterback and the way that they handled it. Skylar Thompson plays the first 3 series, and I think they probably planned on getting Delton in then the next couple series. But after the pick 6 for Alex Delton then to start the second half after that error and an interception that also should have occurred that they dropped in the second quarter against him, Skylar Thompson didn't do anything in the first 3 series he had to get benched, to really earn that, to be benched one of the next 7 of the next 8 series. And that was my issue. He played 3 of the next 37 snaps after that. And, I just think Skylar Thompson should have started the second half. To me, it looks like he played tight to start that game. And this is my biggest fear. I talked about it last week. I feel like if you don't name a starting quarterback and you don't go with Skylar Thompson, he's going to play tight, look over his shoulder all the time, and not really go out there and be the gunslinger that he is.
You had that juggling situation going on. You also had new coordinators making their first appearance calling plays. And defensively, I couldn't point out anything to my naked eye that seemed off about Blake Seiler trying to get that done. But offensively, Bill Snyder after the game was pretty upset. You could tell pretty upset when he was asked about the coordinators and trying to figure all that out. So how much of the blame do we assess, Cole, to the fact that K-State was working a new coordinator in? Because say what you will about Dana Dimmel, he did have 20-plus years of experience calling plays.
I think that was a large part of it. I think there were some communication errors on the sideline, and there was obviously some disagreements as well in the quarterback situation, I believe, as well as some of the plays that were run. And, to me, the biggest thing that sticks out is just late in that game when K-State is in a 3rd and inches situation with less than a minute on the clock, and they let the play clock run down to 1, and everyone thinks they're going to call a timeout, and they just take inexplicably a delay of game penalty, which then puts them in a 3rd and 6, and they run a pass, which is great to get the first, but they go out of bounds. You could have kneeled it if you just run the quarterback sneak, get the first, game's over. You just can't take a delay of game penalty there. To me, that's a communication-type issue where you got to get the timeout in or get a play in.
And you wonder if there's too many cooks in the kitchen because 3 gentlemen on the staff have offensive coordinator in their title, at least, with the 2 co-coordinators and Charlie Dickey and Colin Klein, along with Andre Coleman. Then how much influence does Bill Snyder have over personnel and some of those decisions? You're talking about trying to have 4 or 5 voices, if you're including Sean as well, in this conversation about what's going on.
Well, I think that could be, and it was a different way for the offense to even kind of get started. You saw some no huddle looks, although it wasn't like sprinting up to the line Texas Tech or Oklahoma style, but so they got signs now on the sideline with the pictures on them. They've got guys signaling plays in from what apparently looks like a duck blind on the side. It's so shielded. It is different, and I think maybe shaking some of that loose is something. I agree with you, John. I think it's easy to, for fans' perspective, to be like, oh, it's going to be this new hot, crazy offense, and you really did kind of see some opportunity maybe to change up the play calling a little bit, try to move a few things around. It wasn't working in the first half, and there really weren't adjustments made until fourth quarter.
It's going to be a tough go against Mississippi State, one of the best defenses in the country statistically. especially after week one. 17 tackles for loss against Stephen F. Austin, a defensive line that I mentioned Phil Steele said was best in the SEC behind only Clemson and Ohio State nationally. They also have an experienced quarterback who didn't play last week, but Nick Fitzgerald, Colin Klein-esque. He has Colin Klein-esque numbers. That's going to provide a significant challenge today, too.
He's really going to test K-State's run defense. Fitzgerald's a guy that, you look at Klein, and he averaged a little more than 4 yards per carry in his career. A large part of that is because he ran 800 quarterback sneaks to knock that number down. But Fitzgerald is 6.6 yards per carry in his career, nearly 2,400 rushing yards, one of the most prolific running quarterbacks in SEC history. Struggles a little bit in the passing game, but to me, this game is going to be decided on the defensive side of the football. For Mississippi State going against K-State's offense, such a dominant group up front that they have. They get after the quarterback. They have huge. They return everybody. I mean, all their production is back, and they don't just go, one deep. They're 2-3 deep where they rotate guys in constantly. So it's going to be a heck of a challenge.
We go to our first break on Powercat Gameday this morning. You can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Powercat Gameday. We'll post a wrap-up video after the game. You will get analysis plus hear from players and Coach Snyder after K-State takes on Mississippi State. When we return, Alex Delton with our player interview and the Wildcat Weekend Sound. How did the team handle the post-game aftermath of last week? This is Powercat Gameday.
This is Powercat Gameday. The Powercat Gameday forecast.
Brought to you by Al Langton Insurance, serving Manhattan for over 40 years. Call Al Langton Insurance for home, auto, and renter's insurance. They know insurance, so you don't have to.
Well, there's a chance for rain in the forecast today, about a 40% chance for showers or a little bit of drizzle up until around 10. And then after that, it's supposed to clear out. So what you've got now is what you're going to have for your tailgating and your breakfast. Should be pretty good come game time. Going to be nice, a little bit more football weather compared to last week. It was a little swampy down on the field, a little hot, pretty humid. 71 is your high today. Just going to be partly cloudy kickoff.
We're back here on Powercat Gameday. John Kurtz, Corey Dean, Cole Manbeck. We'll hear from Alex Delton later on this segment, one of two quarterbacks we saw for the Wildcats last Saturday. It was a disappointing game. There was some feeling almost like a loss afterwards with the players and how disappointed they were with the way that they played. Let's hear from them in the Wildcat Weekend Sound.
This is the Wildcat Weekend Sound.
Let's go!
If we don't drop passes, that's 14 points on the board. If we score, as we're hopefully capable of when we get the ball down close to the goal line, then that's probably another 16 points. If we don't turn the ball over, there's another 10 points.
Zuber at the 15-yard line, runs far side 20, 25, 30. Has room, middle of the field. He's at the 20, 10, 5. Wildcat touchdown. Zuber takes it to the house. Third and long for the Cats. Here's Skylar Thompson. Good protection. Shoots it down the middle and high. Zuber up into the air. Did he catch it? Touchdown, Zuber. Lorber from 51, right hash to tie. Kick is on the way. This one is straight at it, but way short. And Kansas State escapes in week one.
I also want to apologize to all the K-State fans that came today. I didn't come ready, and I'm a better player than that. I know I am. My teammates know that too, and we're going to take some responsibility for this offense's poor performance. And we're going to come back better next week.
I think taking the team for granted is effort. What did we do wrong tonight? Penalties, fumbles, interceptions, just lack of communication sometimes, right? That's a focus thing. That's not an effort thing.
Every time we got something going, we just kept getting it called back. So, if we can clean everything up and not have those big sort of mistakes like that, my turnovers, the penalties, all this sort of stuff, then we'll go back to being the team that we were in summer and in fall camp.
You don't have to tell me that Mississippi State's ranked whatever they're ranked to tell me they're a good football team. I mean, I see that on tape. I watch the tape. The guy that decides, or all those people that decide where people are ranked, they don't watch the tape.
I mean, they're talented. They're super talented. But I've seen, some Texas A&M teams with Myles Garrett. To me, it's who we play. It's not even about that, to be honest with you. It's just about us and how we execute.
I think they're great football players, but I go against a lot of great football players in the Big 12. And do those guys look like some of the better film that I've watched? For sure. But I've seen Big 12 players do the same thing that they're doing. So I don't think that they're anything crazy special.
We're going to need all the help that we can get. but it's accomplishable, that's for sure. You know, we have a very good game plan this week. Coach Coleman's really drawing up some pretty cool stuff for us.
Our job is to worry about what we do, and if we can worry about what we do as Kansas State football and execute and have that discipline and have that focus, we're going to be in a good spot.
That was Dalton Reisner at the end there in the Wildcat Weekend Sound. The offensive line was probably at the top of the list of disappointments for me in Week 1. They have a huge test with that defensive line that Mississippi State brings in with a lot of star power. How big does the offensive line have to be in terms of taking a jump from Week 1 to Week 2 today?
Well, this is going to be their biggest challenge they probably faced in a couple of years. I think it's the best defensive front that they will have faced since this group has really been together starting. So I know you face Myles Garrett in the Texas Bowl, but collectively the depth that they have up front is tremendous in the way they get after it, and schematically as well. They'll bring a lot of pressure and they'll stunt you. So K-State's really going to be tested against a unit that ranked third in the country in sack rate last year, returns everybody, and K-State's offensive line was dead last in sack rate in terms of protection the last 2 seasons. So they're going to have to pick it up. But the pass protection to me won't be even the biggest issue. It's you got to be able to shove guys around and run the ball. And against South Dakota, I know a lot of people talked about keeping the game plan vanilla. I don't really get into that. I don't care about, what they're running up front. I think K-State should have been able to shove them around, and they weren't. And to me, that's frustrating to watch.
If you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, which K-State Online provided all of that from K-State's first game, they were actually pretty good in pass protection, but running the ball is where they had more issues. And the key against Mississippi State is going to be being able to run the ball so that they can't just tee off with Sweat and Simmons, the great defensive linemen that they have when you're trying to pass on 3rd and long, or K-State may be on John Holcomb as quarterback next week.
Yeah, you worry about how many hits your quarterback is going to take, especially after week number 1. And Montez Sweat, number 9, you watch that guy run around because he's going to be a problem today. And Mississippi State against Stephen F. Austin last week brought an extra defender on every passing play. Literally they blitzed every time Stephen F. Austin dropped back to pass. And they brought him from weird angles. Sometimes it was safety. Sometimes it was linebacker. Sometimes they drop a guy into coverage and they bring guys on from the corner. It is a weird defense to play against because they're so emphatic on getting pressure. And they will blitz all the time. K-State's got to be smart. You got to be able to pick it up. And it's an offense that runs to set up the pass. And you can't get anything done on 1st and 2nd down. It just puts you in a really, really bad spot. 3rd down, they're going to tee off on this offense if it's 3rd and long consistently today.
Well, first of all, any defensive lineman that wears a single-digit number is probably
scary.
Good. And is good in my book because I like that. I like the style there of Sweat as far as that's concerned. How about Alex Delton? The quarterbacks, I think we agreed Skylar Thompson outplayed him. The Pro Football Focus grades indicated Thompson had the best game of any offensive player, and Delton was 3rd worst. So there's numbers to back up what everybody seems to be saying coming out of that game. The biggest complaint, I think, is that Delton seemed to be stuck on one receiver and was not going through progressions. That did hurt him with the interception and could have been worse with some others.
I think we all noticed that. I mean, when you go back and you watch the game, which isn't fun to do, Alex Delton took the snap and usually just stared at one receiver, and either he went to that receiver or he took off in a clean pocket and broke free running to the outside when he had a clean pocket to still throw in, kind of panicked. Skylar Thompson, when you look through the progressions, he kind of goes through his reads a little bit more. Sometimes he does hold on to the ball too long, but he is looking off guys, and to me, Alex Delton wasn't doing that, and Corey made the recognition that, South Dakota went zone as a result of it, and then they were dropping the linebacker, just reading his eyes, dropping him underneath, and that's what led to what should have been several interceptions for Delton.
Well, they originally switched zone to slow him down in the running game because when they were going man, you run everybody off, and then Delton can run free. So they switched to zone as a result of running plays, and it actually worked better for them against the pass.
The one thing I will say, and I'm all aboard giving Skylar Thompson the comfort and resources of being the starting quarterback. Today, if you struggle running the ball, Alex Delton might be the best option that you have to try and get a running game established just because of the extra blocker that you get out on the field if they're not able to contain the front of Mississippi State. That's where the offensive line comes back into play here.
Well, the interesting thing from looking at the numbers last week, and this is just numbers, it's a stat base, so schematically things could have changed, but with Alex Delton in the game, Alex Barnes averaged 2.3 yards per carry. He had 18 yards on 8 carries. And with Skylar Thompson in, he had 85 yards on 13 carries, an average of 6.5 yards per rush. So there was a definite difference in being able to run the ball with the running back with Thompson in the game, and granted, it could have just been a schematic change, or it could have been the fact that Skylar Thompson presents more of a threat to throw, so they couldn't gear up against the run and take that away.
think that theory makes sense, and that's probably what I would go with. We've got our player interview now with, speak of the devil, Alex Stelton. They're brought to you by the Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Center of Manhattan. Get back in the game with the same doctors trusted by Kansas State University. Online at kansasortho.com. Alex Stelton knows there's a lot of talent he'll be facing in Mississippi State, but he is not intimidated by facing this sort of a D.
They're a talented group of guys, no doubt. I think our group is a talented group of guys. So it's going to be some good-on-good competition. They have some guys that are, they say first-round potential, So obviously we're going to have to be on our A game, and we're going to have to play well to beat these guys. And their defensive line is very big, and they're talented. So, our offensive line has their work cut out for them, but I believe in our offensive line. I'm trusting that they'll get the job done.
Does it look like a different level to you than what you typically see in the Big 12 or in your non-conference schedule?
Honestly, not really. I think that obviously, like I said, they're talented. They're super talented. But I've been around. It's my Richard Jr. year, so I've seen some Texas A&M teams with Myles Garrett, and I've seen I've seen a lot of good teams. So it's just, to me, it's who we play. It's not even about that. To be honest with you, it's just about us and how we execute. Because as you've seen last week, we didn't beat ourselves, but we put ourselves in a position where we could have beat ourselves. So it's about us getting better. And obviously Mississippi State's a great team, and they're gonna bring their game. But our focus right now is to get better.
Obviously, both you and Skyler are gonna play a part in this game. What's the vibe maybe in the quarterback room right now, and what are you guys thinking moving forward?
The vibe right now is just that I don't know if Skyler's gonna be here today, but I don't think we both played up to our capabilities. I think as an offensive unit, we weren't as crisp as I'd like, and so right now, man, it's literally like, when we watch film, when we do anything, it's the mentality that we have to be better than last week. We have to be sharper. We have to pay more attention to details, and that's what we're taking into this week. We know what Mississippi State can do defensively, so we know we're gonna have to be sharp and we're gonna have to execute.
That being said, did you feel better after watching the film of last week, or did you feel worse about your personal performance after getting it? Talking to Coach Coleman, Coach Klein.
It's kind of indifferent, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime you play that poorly, you're never going to feel good about anything. Just mistakes. Mistakes we made that we make nine times out of 10 in practice. So, it's just part of the game, though. You learn it. You learn to, love/hate it. It happens every week. So I didn't think I played to my fullest capability, obviously, and I don't think the offense we did. But I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure that this week is a good week for us.
With the team, you guys are preaching being businesslike. Anything change after such a close call in week one?
I want to say so. We, it was I'd say Sunday at recovery. It's kind of like a little. Even though we won, it's kind of like a disappointment. We were pretty disappointed in how we played. South Dakota was a good team, though. Don't get me wrong; they played well, but it was disappointment. Just the fact that we felt like we played so poorly, and we had so many penalties and so many turnovers that typically you don't win when you play that poorly. And so it was kind of a sense of disappointment. But I feel like we had some guys step up and talk to the team, and that we can't afford that. And it's Sunday we can kind of mourn that and be disappointed, but now it's Monday. We're Mississippi State prep, so yesterday, and it's all go now. That's in the past. We did our corrections yesterday, and as far as I'm concerned, South Dakota's behind us. We have it in our mind, we cannot perform that poorly again, but it's in the past right now, and we're focused on Mississippi State and being the best we can be this week.
Appreciate Alex Stelton being very insightful as always on Tuesday at the press conference. We go to break on Powercat Gameday. On the other side, we'll talk defense, specifically the defensive backfield. Disappointment in Duke Shelley, but there was one bright spot. We'll tell you who that is, plus 5 questions with Fitz as we return on Powercat Gameday.
K-State fans, this is Powercat Gameday. Powercat Gameday's 5 questions with Fitz.
John Kurtz with Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowercat.com. 5 questions with Fitz this week on Powercat Gameday. Not a pretty opener. K-State wins by 3, 27-24. What's most concerning to come out of that game?
Most concerning for me was the offensive line. This is supposed to be one of the best offensive lines in the country, going against a FCS team that, granted, is a good FCS team, but they should have been able to assert their will. Now, I'm going to give them the fact that they were loading it up, trying to stop Alex Barnes, and eventually the quarterback run game shook things loose. But I saw too many good offensive linemen not getting their job done man on man. So, forget the linebackers. They weren't handling the guy in front of them. That was most troubling. And I'm waiting for this offensive line to really become the physical force that past K-State offensive lines have been. They were briefly at the end last year. They were better at it. But with the physical nature of those dudes up front and who they are, they got to get mean. They've got to start blowing people off the ball. Now, they're not going to blow Mississippi State off the ball, but, they're going to have to get really competitive. And maybe this game, even if it doesn't turn out well for Kansas State, will show these guys this is where you need to be. This is how you need to play every snap, because these dudes are going to eat you alive if you don't. And that's the standard. And they're not living up to the standard that they should be at right now.
How much blame does go on being vanilla, as Bill Snyder always is, and the fact that you're breaking in new coordinators?
Well, that kind of ties together in the fact that Bill Snyder wants to be vanilla, wants to keep it simple, not put anything on film. Most years I'm kind of like, Coach, really, everyone knows what you're going to run. They've all seen it. This year may be a little different. These two coordinators might do some different things that they actually don't want to show. Now, offensively, I think it was a little shameful what K-State tried to do early in the game. It was so basic and bland and predictable that it put, in specifically Skylar Thompson in a really bad position not to succeed. And they need to start putting their kids in a position to succeed and do some things. On the defensive side, I look at the coverage that statistically was good, but you remembered some big plays. There were some plays where you got to get stopped. That's a first down. That happened throughout the game, particularly to Duke Shelley. But it struck me that they were still using many of the same coverages they used last year, which might be totally different than what Brian Norwood would prefer to do with his secondary this year and maybe today in this game. And that I understand why you wouldn't want to put it on film. I get that. But some of the stuff that you've always run and you can run, whether Coleman's the offensive coordinator or Dana Demmel or anyone else, go on. Open up the playbook just enough to give your teams a chance to win, which is what they did in the fourth quarter, and part of the reason why they seemed to play better in the fourth quarter.
You brought up Duke Shelley, and on that note, is it a good thing or a bad thing that Kevion McGee, this JUCO transfer, looks like your best corner in week one?
Well, Duke Shelley looked like the third best corner. If I was left to my decision based on what I saw in one game, which isn't fair, it's just one game, A.J. Parker and McGee would be my starting corners. I might look at Duke Shelley as a nickelback. He's too forgiving at times on coverage. He doesn't come out of cuts very well. Guys can separate a good FCS receiver, not to be insulting here, a Curry Sexton type guy, which is what he was covering. If Curry had gone to that level, took him to school for most of the day. That's troubling. Duke's got to up that level, not just because K-State needs it, but his dignity needs it. Better receivers are going to just humiliate him as the season goes if he doesn't up his level. And you know what? I don't think Brian Norwood gives a crap that he's been starting for 3 years, 2.5 years. He's going to put the best guys on the field eventually. 5
questions with Fitz on Powercat Gameday. Did we learn something about the two-quarterback system with what we saw that it may
stinks.
struggle?
Yeah. It stinks. Well, and honestly, it typically doesn't work, and it's a hard balance to make. I don't think trying to go 50-50 will ever work. Skyler really I've been joking that you should probably just let Alex start and then let Skyler come in and close, because that's when he seems to be at his best late in the game. But I don't think Skyler was really given a fair shake. You look at those. He had very generic play calling in the first possession. Second possession, Alex Barnes fumbles on the first play. The third possession, they go down and kick a field goal, but he threw a touchdown pass that was dropped. Out he comes. And he doesn't go back in until one snap or one possession at the end of the first half. And then he comes in the third quarter because Alex Delton started the second half. How he lifted himself and got into a rhythm says a lot about him, but he appears to be a very slow starter in games. And maybe that goes into the play calling. Maybe he needs a little something called early on instead of the predictable stuff. We'll see. I'm a fan of both of them. They both have their purposes, and I would give my kingdom, if I had one, to let Alex Delton run a little option in this game and, try to what they won't be able to accomplish with brute force against Mississippi State's front, accomplish that with a little sleight of hand.
How does K-State hang around in this game?
Well, special teams have to be fantastic for K-State. That is always true for K-State. It was even true against South Dakota. They're going to have to be really good in that area. But they're going to have to finish drives. They're going to have to open up the playbook. John, I think this game is critical to the season. Now, could they lose this game, lift themselves up, and go on a run in the Big 12? Sure. But I think if they win this game, they're going to go to West Virginia in a couple weeks knowing they're the better team, really believing they're the better team, even though West Virginia is really good this year. So I think this is a critical game, and I know Coach Snyder likes to save things. He likes to keep them in his back pocket. But, Coach, it's time to put some cards on the table and go for the big win. You might want to take a big swing because this is a big opponent. This is an opponent that if you beat could still go into the SEC and do some serious damage and end up being a top 10 team. This team, folks, is really good. They're better than I thought at season start. This defensive line is frightening, and Kansas State needs to up their level significantly, not to get blown out. They need to be really good today, and they need the coaches to be really good and let them play.
Fitz, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy the game.
Absolutely.
Back on Powercat Game Day, live from the K-State Office Park. John Kurtz, Corey Dean, and Cole Manbeck. Appreciate the time of Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowercat.com. One thing I wanted to talk about on both sides of the ball, really, what we saw week one, some of this is because you have multiple quarterbacks, multiple running backs that we assumed would get carries and be around, but there were more players playing on both sides of the ball than you would typically see in a game where the outcome was not decided. Defensively, they were not afraid at all to go to Kevion McGee at corner when they felt like, when Blake Seiler, that is, felt like his defense wasn't getting the job done. There seemed to be more of a willingness to do that, to dip into utilizing your depth a little bit more. I may be making too much of that from week one, but I thought that was something positive.
Well, I think they were trying to keep some guys fresh. I thought it was interesting what they were doing at the safety position as well when they brought in Eli Walker for several different series, especially in the first half, and took Kendall Adams out of the game. And so I don't know if that was the thing where they're trying to keep Adams fresh coming off the Achilles tear last year. And conditioning-wise, just getting him into the flow of the game. They did the same thing with Elijah Sullivan, who we didn't expect to play, but he was banged up, earlier heading into the game, so maybe his conditioning wasn't quite there yet. So they started Sam Seisler, but they were rotating Sullivan in. They played 8 defensive linemen in the game, 4 DNs, 4 D tackles, although Drew Wiley didn't play a ton at defensive tackle, so they rotated guys in there. I think you're right, and then like you said, they weren't afraid to take a guy out if it wasn't working and put another guy in and Kevion McGee at the corner position.
Joe Davies, a defensive tackle, was one of only 4 K-State defenders to grade 70 or higher by Pro Football Focus. So we didn't expect him to win one of the starting jobs. He had a very nice game one. And at corner, I'm being serious when I say Kevion McGee was your best corner on the field, especially in the fourth quarter last week. That is good on one hand because a junior college transfer who's come in actually has, without much fanfare, put himself in position to really contribute. The bad part of that is that Duke Shelley did not look good, especially in the first half. He was getting beat up by a receiver that maybe profiles to a Curry Sexton type of receiver, and you know that you're going to see more talented players in the Big 12.
Yeah, Levi Falk had 11 catches. 11 catches, first of all, is a lot for one guy. And, I realize that they hoisted it, 54 times or something like that throughout the game. They threw it around, or tried to throw it a lot, but 11 catches for 140 yards. And you kind of knew if they needed a big play or a third down, they were going to number 88, and Duke was lined up with him more often than not, especially in that first half. And he just wasn't getting it done, which was surprising because Duke was a guy who kind of seemed poised to maybe have a breakout season. I know that I expected him to step up his level of play. He played pretty well at the end of last year when DJ Reed wasn't on the field some of those times in those last games. He had an opportunity there, didn't take it. I'm with you. I was excited how good McGee looked. You needed it, honestly, especially late in the game. It was a little disturbing after the fumble happens with 50 seconds to go to see that South Dakota team move it down the field and actually got within striking distance of having a for real shot at that long field goal. Late penalty kind of pushed them back there, but they moved the ball down the field with under 50 seconds to go, and you're concerned about the secondary, I think, is real right now.
South Dakota targeted McGee 8 times in the second half, only 1 completion. He got his hands on 5 different balls, broke up 5 different passes during that game. So they went after him, and he did a great job of defending the pass. And he's a guy that they signed very late. He was a commitment on signing day, unexpectedly out of the JUCO ranks in Oklahoma, and they bring him in, and he's a guy that was here for spring ball. And I think he is a starting corner in the Big 12. And I think he's a guy, just from the ball skills you saw on Saturday and how tight he was on the receivers, I think he's a guy that you're going to have to play consistently going forward.
Offensively and on special teams, Isaiah Zuber was the star, and we have not given him his due yet, not talking to him until segment 3 of the show, but he has the 80-plus yard punt return for a touchdown. He also has that wild touchdown catch on a great pass from Skylar Thompson that was the go-ahead TD. There are signs in what happened on Saturday that Zuber is ready to be the number 1 playmaker. We all wondered if he would be this year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the catch, like you mentioned, John, that he had in the back of the end zone was phenomenal. He got both feet down on that play in the back. It was a great throw, the only place he could throw it as well. And he goes up and gets that ball with defenders all around him. Terrific play. And then, like you mentioned, the punt return, we kind of saw finally that breakaway speed that we talked about with him, where he turned something into a big play. And maybe that'll give him the confidence now to start becoming more of a big play receiver and starting to stretch the field a little bit more with him.
Another break on Powercat Game Day. We'll start looking around the Big 12 when we return. Big 12 Huddle, a preview of Iowa and Iowa State from our Iowa State Powercat Game Day reporter Dave Sproul and Robert's World. He's not happy with Tom Herman and David Beatty. Find out why next.
This is Powercat Game Day. Today in the top 25.
Today in the top 25, brought to you by Manhattan Christian College, educating, equipping, and enriching Christian leaders since 1927. Catch the spirit at Manhattan Christian College.
Well, there's one game final in the top 25. It was played in a lot of rain, but TCU finally puts away, after a couple-hour delay, SMU last night. Kind of coasted at the end of that game. It was a slow start for the Horned Frogs, but they get it in gear, 42-12, all 42 coming after the first quarter. That was an interesting ball game with all the rain last night. A lot of drops and made the special teams a little bit fun to watch. So the big game's coming up today in the top 25. It gets started early with, of course, Mississippi State, K-State here, but Wisconsin hosts New Mexico at home. Number 21, Michigan gets Western Michigan. Oklahoma, UCLA. That's a noon kickoff. Will Chip Kelly bounce back in game number 2? I don't know. That Oklahoma team looked pretty dominant last week. Virginia Tech, William Mary, Oregon, Portland State, Bama, Arkansas State, South Carolina, Georgia, one of the few top 25 matchups. That's a 2:30 kickoff in South Carolina. Ohio State gets Rutgers, Notre Dame, Ball State, Washington, North Dakota, West Virginia, Youngstown State. You catch the theme here. It's not a whole lot of really great games in college football. A&M, Clemson is a night game. LSU, Southeast Louisiana, Florida, Kentucky, Pittsburgh, Penn State, USC, Stanford, one of the better games of the night. That's a 7:30 kickoff to get things done. And then the super late game, number 15, Michigan State on the road at Arizona State. It's a night game. They had to make sure it was a late kickoff. Kickoff temperature still expected to be 104 for that game, even though it kicks off at 9:45 Central Time.
Mount Tempe, Herm Edwards, week 1 was pretty impressive. Everybody's
not bad,
trying to tear down our guy Herm Edwards, but he actually had a nice debut for Arizona State. We're back on Powercat Game Day. John Kurtz, Corey Dean, and Cole Manbeck live from the K-State Office Park. Robert's World is coming up later on this segment, but for now we'll look around the Big 12. Our Big 12 huddle is brought to you by Nelson's Landing. Cheer on the Cats at Nelson's Landing. Come for the food, stay for the fun, just off Highway 24 in Leonardville. Iowa State did not get to play last week. They played a little bit, but then the game gets punched and they don't get it in against South Dakota State, so they have to open up with a tough road test at Iowa. Here's Dave Sproul with more.
Iowa State Powercat Game Day reporter Dave Sproul.
Iowa State opens their season a week later than planned, and they'll do it against an in-state rival. The Cyclones saw their scheduled opener last Saturday canceled by weather, so they'll go to Iowa untested. ISU coach Matt Campbell says he's looking to his veteran leaders to keep the team on track.
We lost some meaningful reps, and you can sit there and make those as excuses, but nobody cares. And, the reality of it is we have to continue to grow and get better, just like any team does from week to week. But now you got to do it, and you got to do it against yourselves, and you got to continue to do it in practice.
Campbell says his offensive line will be tested by the Hawkeyes' veteran defensive front.
When they've needed to make a play, when good things have had to happen, that defensive line has spearheaded things. And so, I think you're getting maybe one of the best defensive lines in the country, and they play hard. They're consistent. They're going to play as hard as they can for as long as they can, and it's really impressive.
Offensive lineman Josh Kniffel says last year's overtime loss to Iowa taught the Cyclones the value of staying focused for a whole game.
It doesn't matter what the first quarter like or the second quarter like. It's a 4-quarter game, and you just got to keep going. We can't get relaxed when we're out there. We play a lot of good teams this year, so they're not just going to fold if we're up by a touchdown or whatever it may be, and we can't fold if they're up by a touchdown. It's a 4-quarter game, 60 minutes, so we have to come out and be ready to go every game.
Iowa State and Iowa kick off at 4 o'clock in Iowa City. I'm Dave Sproul for Powercat Gameday.
Thanks for that, Dave. That really is a tough test to have to do that on the road without your tune-up game in week 1 for Iowa State. Much as I poke fun at the Cyclones, I don't envy them having to do that against Iowa. I would imagine, though, this is going to be a close game. Iowa has a good defense. Iowa State has David Montgomery, one of the better offensive players in the conference, and it just seems like this series, every game is very close.
Your favorite game to talk about each year, right? Kirk Ferentz versus the Cyclones, huh? Two of your favorite teams. No, I think it will be a close game, but ultimately, just because Iowa State didn't get to work out the kinks last week against South Dakota State, and Iowa did in their season opener, I will take Iowa also because they're at home. Although the road team has done well in this series, Iowa State went into Iowa City a few years ago and kicked a game-winning field goal as big underdogs. So it's a 3-point spread, but I would take Iowa in this one.
You buying Iowa State as being an improved team this year?
No, I think they'll actually be worse this year. I mean, the guys that they lost, up front and then on the defensive side of the football, I'm not seeing them being a 7 or 8 win team. I think they're probably a 6-win squad.
I tend to agree, and I think that missing that first game is terrible for them because they aren't able to get ready before this game. This one went out of overtime last year, so historically it's close, but I have a hard time seeing the Cyclones getting this one on the road today.
Let's hear what Robert Lipson has to say. K-State super fan, as always, chatting with me earlier in the week. And, week 1 did not go all that well. Everybody seems to be disappointed. We'll see what Robert had to say.
Respect the streak. Robert's World with K-State superfan Robert Lipson.
It's another edition of Robert's World on Powercat Gameday. I'm John Kurtz, joined by K-State superfan Robert Lipson. K-State taking on Mississippi State after they won by 3, 27-24 over South Dakota in a nail-biter last week. Robert, how scared were you that K-State was going to lose that game?
Well, I thought I was watching North Dakota State again, but did you see what Appalachian State did with Pennsylvania State? Same difference. So much for cupcakes and marshmallows. I guess the best of those teams really are capable. It's more parity now. I thought that the Coyotes had control of the game. Made mistakes, turnovers, and they were going to beat us. And even if the special teams did not score a touchdown, I thought a desperate sense of urgency would set in the fourth quarter and at least make it closer. But you can't read too much into openers because the most improvement is made between openers and the second game. We'll be just fine when the next Egg Bowl champions come calling.
What'd you think of the rest of the Big 12 in Week 1? Texas losing, Kansas losing?
Well, the Thunderhawks disappointed me. I wanted David Beatty to win that game. We need David Beatty at Kansas because if he walks, they'll get another Bear Mangino in there and we're toast. But yeah, I thought the Mountain Climbers over the Volunteers, that was good. But the Mad Cows let our conference down against the Boxing Turtles.
Mississippi State coming in. Have you ever had any interaction with Mississippi State fans?
Do you remember we played them here, was it 1979, one of the late 70s? We played them here in a non-con game at home. Do you remember that? I remember it. Not too many of the fans came over, but I do remember them.
A lot of people will talk about the SEC leading into this game. Do they get more attention as a conference than they deserve?
Well, because their conference keeps producing playoff contenders. if we want to be headlined like that, our conference needs to improve.
Will K-State win this game against Mississippi State?
Oh, sure. We'll blow them out by just only 1 point. I think that this will be altogether different because everybody's more excited. The team will be more excited. Home cooking will probably win this game. I'll learn more about this team today than I did last week.
What's your tailgate schedule like today, Robert?
I'm going to be on the grass and satellite lots, and only the grass and satellite lots. Starting at Denison, going to agronomy since it's an early game. I'd be darned if I even get that far. And after the game, I'll go on the rec center side and go see those tailgates after the game on the bicycle. Okay? Now, if there's any Bulldogs listening, this is what we do. Welcome to Wildcat Country. It's a very accommodating crowd. You won't get rocks and bottles thrown at you like you do at the Grove. So feel free to come over to any of our tailgates and help yourself. Okay, they'll take it as a compliment. And John, you agree with me if this is be the first time in a while that MSU will win both the Paul Bunyan Trophy and the Egg Bowl in the same season. You Bulldogs will win both the Paul Bunyan Trophy and the Egg Bowl. In fact, you'll add the golden egg to the Paul Bunyan Trophy. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Robert's World.
Appreciate the thoughts of Robert Lipson on Powercat Game Day. Before we move on, we need to pause 10 seconds for station identification. You're listening to Powercat Game Day.
They're your neighbors, your volunteers, your coaches. This is their home, too. Carpet One of Manhattan. They've got you covered. KMAN, Manhattan.
When we come back, the top 3 storylines of the week, plus going deep with Kevin Lockett. What was his analysis of the K-State receiving corps in week 1? This is Powercat Game Day.
K-State fans, this is Powercat Game Day.